The thunder of artillery guns became the voice of victory in the Great Patriotic War. Among those who conducted this deadly symphony, Bagrat Arushanyan occupies a special place, a brilliant strategist and master of fiery onslaught. He was called the Lord of Steel Storms, a man capable of transforming disparate batteries into a single, striking fist. Soviet artillery, under the leadership of commanders like Arushanyan, deservedly earned the title God of War, deciding the outcome of key battles. From the tragic days of retreat to the triumphant assault on Berlin, Bagrat traversed the path of military mastery, time and again proving, properly organized artillery fire can turn the tide of history. His name is inscribed in golden letters in the annals of Soviet military art, and his fire control methods are studied even today. The dramatic history of the entire war, from the bitterness of defeats to the grandeur of victories, was reflected in the fate of this Armenian by nationality and Soviet officer by calling. Bagrat Arushanyan was born in 1903 in the Armenian village of Lori, where mountain ranges shape not only the landscape but also the character of its people, as firm as stone and as flexible as mountain rivers. His father, Isaac Arushanyan, was a blacksmith, a man whose hands transformed red-hot metal into useful things. Perhaps it was from here that young Bagrat inherited an understanding of the power of fire and metal, which later transformed into the skill of an artilleryman. The childhood of the future commander fell on a turbulent time: the First World War, the Revolution, the Civil War. These events hardened the young man's character, taught him to value peace and to understand the price at which it is achieved. In the Arushanyan family, traditions were honored, but at the same time, children's aspirations for education and self-development were encouraged. The military path became a conscious choice for young Bagrat. In the 20s, he entered an artillery school where he showed outstanding abilities in mathematics and ballistics, sciences without which accurate firing is impossible. Teachers noted his analytical mind, his ability to quickly perform complex calculations, and his spatial thinking, qualities invaluable for an artilleryman. At the school, Arushanyan did not just master the curriculum, he eagerly absorbed knowledge, studying additional literature on artillery, including the works of Tsarist officers and foreign specialists. Even then he understood, artillery is not just the power of shells, but a complex science requiring deep knowledge and precise calculation. The first years of service in the Red Army formed in Arushanyan an understanding of the need for continuous improvement. He participated in exercises, experimental firings, and studied new types of weapons. Commanders noted his initiative and unconventional approach to solving tactical problems. By the 30s, Bagrat was already an experienced artillery officer. He underwent training at the military academy, where he deepened his knowledge in the field of tactics and strategy of artillery application in modern warfare. It was during this time that his views on the massive use of artillery, its interaction with other branches of troops, and methods of fire control were formed. On June 22, 1941, the peaceful life of Soviet people was shattered by the roar of German bombings. For Lieutenant Colonel Bagrat Arushanyan, as for millions of others, the most terrible war in human history began. By this time, Arushanyan commanded an artillery regiment in the Western Special Military District. The first weeks of the war became a harsh test for him. The suddenness of the attack, the enemy's air superiority, the lack of communication and clear command, all this created chaos in which decisions had to be made that determined the lives of hundreds of people. Arushanyan faced the first harsh reality of war. His artillerymen, who had excellent theoretical training, were not ready for the rapid German tank breakthroughs. The enemy acted according to new tactics. Concentrated armored strikes, accompanied by aviation, broke through defenses and created the threat of encirclement. In these circumstances, Bagrat Isakovich displayed qualities that subsequently made him an outstanding artillery commander. He quickly adapted to the situation, developing new methods of countering German tank wedges. Instead of the traditional uniform distribution of guns along the front, Arushanyan began to create anti-tank strongholds, concentrated groups of guns in probable breakthrough directions. He told his officers during short breaks between battles. This philosophy helped maintain combat effectiveness in the most difficult conditions of retreat. The battles near Smolensk in the summer of 1941 became an especially severe test. German tank divisions were rushing towards Moscow, and Arushanyan's artillerymen often found themselves as the last line of defense. In one battle, his regiment, finding itself semi-encircled, managed to repel an attack by a German tank column, destroying 17 enemy vehicles. During this period, Arushanyan learned a crucial lesson. In modern warfare, the one who can maneuver fire, not just equipment, wins. He began to develop a methodology for rapidly shifting fire from one sector to another, which allowed small forces to solve large problems. Another discovery for Arushanyan was the need for close interaction with infantry and tanks. He personally went to the front lines to coordinate actions with commanders of other units, despite the mortal danger. By the autumn of 1941, Bagrat Isakovich was already commanding divisional artillery. His experience from the first months of the war formed the basis of tactical techniques that were later used across the entire front. The main thing that this tragic period of retreats taught him was never to lose faith in victory and the ability of Soviet troops to turn the tide of the war. By the middle of the war, Bagrat Arushanyan had transformed into a true master of artillery tactics. The experience of the first difficult years of battles allowed him to develop unique methods for employing the god of war, as artillery was respectfully called at the front. Arushanyan understood. Success in modern warfare is determined not only by the number of guns, but also by the ability to skillfully use them in constantly changing combat conditions. One of Bagrat Isakovich's main tactical discoveries was the principle of, quote, instead of rigidly tying batteries to specific sections of the front, he created mobile artillery groups capable of quickly shifting firepower to where it was needed at a given moment. Arushanyan told his officers, the commander paid special attention to interaction with infantry and tank formations. Unlike outdated notions that artillery should operate separately, Arushanyan introduced the principle of continuous support for advancing units. He developed a targeting system in which forward observers from among the artillerymen moved with the infantry and adjusted fire by radio. Another innovation was the method of countering German tank attacks. Arushanyan created the concept of sections of terrain saturated with artillery of various calibers, echeloned and camouflaged. Such areas became deadly traps for enemy tank wedges. At the same time, Bagrat Isakovich taught his subordinates to conserve ammunition, opening fire only on advantageous targets and at effective distances. An important element of Arushanyan's tactics was the massing of fire. Instead of dispersing artillery along the entire front, he concentrated it on decisive directions. 100 shells on one target are better than one shell on 100 targets. This principle formed the basis of planning artillery strikes under his leadership. Arushanyan paid special attention to reconnaissance. He created special groups of artillery observers who, using optical devices, sound ranging stations, and aerial photography, identified the location of enemy batteries, command posts, and concentrations of equipment. This allowed for precise preemptive strikes against the most important enemy targets. One of the most effective tactical techniques developed by Arushanyan was the creeping barrage, a method of sequentially shifting artillery fire deep into the enemy's defense ahead of advancing troops. This technique created a kind of fiery shield in front of the attacking infantry, suppressing enemy firing points and preventing them from organizing resistance. Stalingrad became a turning point, not only for the entire war, but also for Bagrat Arushanyan's artillery art. In the autumn of 1942, when German troops were rushing towards the Volga, Colonel Arushanyan was tasked with organizing the artillery defense of one of the city's key sectors. It was here that his talent as an artilleryman fully unfolded. The first thing Arushanyan did upon arriving in flaming Stalingrad was to personally study the terrain. He spent hours observing enemy positions, marking firing points, concentrations of equipment, and ammunition supply routes on the map. An artilleryman must see the battlefield through the eyes of a shell, he told his officers. The main problem was the shortage of guns, given the enormous length of the front. Arushanyan found an unconventional solution. He created a system of mobile batteries. Several guns constantly changed positions, creating the illusion of large artillery forces for the enemy. The Germans wasted airstrikes and counter-battery fire on empty positions, while Soviet guns were already firing from new points. Bagrat Arushanyan paid special attention to anti-tank defense. He developed a layered anti-tank gun placement scheme, creating genuine fire traps. Each gun had several prepared positions and clear firing sectors. When German tanks approached, the artillerymen opened fire not simultaneously, but sequentially, forcing the enemy to choose between multiple threats. A shell should hit not the armor, but its vulnerable spots, Arushanyan instructed his soldiers, teaching them to strike tanks in the sides and rear. He personally conducted training sessions with the crews, explaining the features of German armored vehicles and methods of combating them. In one of the key battles, batteries under Arushanyan's command stopped a breakthrough of 50 German tanks, destroying 17 vehicles and forcing the rest to retreat. After this battle, his anti-tank defense methodology was extended to other sectors of the front. With the beginning of preparations for the counter-offensive at Stalingrad, Arushanyan was involved in planning the artillery support for Operation Uranus. Here, his talent as a strategist manifested itself. He proposed a new artillery preparation scheme, not a simple sequential suppression of targets, but a complex system of fire raids of varying intensity, which prevented the enemy from determining the direction of the main strike. On November 19, 1942, at 7:30 a.m., thousands of guns opened fire. An 80-minute artillery preparation began, heralding the encirclement of Paulus's group. Arushanyan was at the command post, coordinating the actions of dozens of batteries. His demand was unwavering. Every shell must have an address. A special feature of the artillery preparation was the use of the double fire barrage method, when fire was shifted not sequentially but in leaps, leaving the enemy unaware of the next target. This allowed German firing points to be suppressed before they could return fire. When the encirclement ring around Paulus's 6th Army closed, Arushanyan began organizing the artillery blockade. He developed a system of circular defense, where guns could fire both into the cauldron and outwards, to repel attempts at de-blocking. This system proved brilliant in repelling Operation Winter Storm, Manstein's attempt to break through to the encircled troops. On July 5, 1943, the sky over the Kursk Bulge trembled from the roar of thousands of guns. A battle began that was destined to become the greatest tank battle in history. And in this battle, the artillery commanded by Bagrat Arushanyan played a decisive role. By the summer of '43, Colonel Arushanyan was already a recognized master of artillery. The experience of Stalingrad allowed him to improve his fire control methods, and the command entrusted him with organizing artillery defense in one of the key sectors of the Kursk Bulge. Preparation for the battle began long before the first shots. Arushanyan carried out colossal work in reconnaissance and planning. His artillerymen created detailed maps of the terrain, indicating all heights, hollows, and potential routes of German tank wedges. Bagrat Isakovich told his officers, Arushanyan's main innovation at the Kursk Bulge was the concept of an artillery anti-tank district. This was a multi-layered defense system where light anti-tank guns were positioned in the first echelon and heavy howitzers and cannons in the second and third. Each layer had its own task. The first stopped and slowed down the movement of tanks. The second destroyed damaged vehicles. The third prevented German infantry from supporting their tanks. Bagrat Isakovich paid special attention to camouflage. He personally inspected each battery, striving for ideal concealment of positions. The Germans should see our guns only when it's already too late, he instructed battery commanders. When the German offensive began, Arushanyan's artillery positions met the enemy with organized fire. A unique feature of his tactics was the method of a quote 3, where fire was not shifted forward, as in an offensive, but sequentially concentrated on approaching tank columns, creating the effect of drawing the enemy into a fire trap. At one critical moment of the battle, when German quote 4 broke through the first line of defense, Arushanyan personally led the counter-battery fight. He gathered all available long-range guns into a single fist and delivered a crushing blow to German artillery positions, depriving the tank wedge of fire support. Quote 5. This phrase of Arushanyan became one of the principles of Soviet artillery art. The battle on July 12th near the village of Prokhorovka became a true triumph of Bagrat Isakovich's tactics. Here, his artillerymen, acting in close cooperation with tank crews, created a real hell for the Germans. The guns fired at the flanks of German columns, disrupting their battle formations and forcing them to cluster, becoming an easy target for Soviet tanks. German tank crews who survived Prokhorovka recalled with horror the invisible Russian artillery, which seemed to be firing from everywhere, giving no moment of respite. This was the result of Arushanyan's meticulous work in creating a crossfire system, where every point of the battlefield was covered by at least 3 batteries from different directions. After the Soviet troops went on the counteroffensive, Bagrat Isakovich brilliantly organized artillery support for the advancing units. His innovation was the method of the artillery fist, when the main mass of guns was concentrated on a narrow breakthrough sector and then quickly moved after the advancing troops, not allowing the enemy to organize new lines of defense. The autumn of 1943 presented the Soviet command with a task of colossal complexity: the forcing of the Dnieper. This water barrier, which the Germans called their Eastern Wall, posed a serious challenge for all branches of the armed forces, but especially for artillery. How to transport heavy guns across a wide river under enemy fire? How to provide fire support to the first landing groups? These questions fell on the shoulders of Bagrat Arushanyan, by then a major general of artillery. Arriving on the banks of the Dnieper in the latter half of September, Arushanyan's first priority was to organize a thorough reconnaissance. He told his officers, under the cover of night, sappers and scouts crossed in boats, compiling detailed maps of enemy positions. Arushanyan's main innovation was the fire corridor method. Instead of the traditional dispersion of batteries along the entire front line, he concentrated the bulk of the guns in narrow sectors, where the crossing was planned. The artillerymen pre-sighted all possible targets on the opposite bank, compiling special firing tables. On the night of September 26th, the operation began. An hour before the crossing of the first assault groups, Arushanyan's artillery opened hurricane fire on German positions. A distinctive feature of this artillery preparation was its dynamism. The fire constantly shifted from one sector to another, preventing the enemy from understanding exactly where the landing would take place. The main thing is to create a curtain of fire between our landing troops and German machine guns. Arushanyan set this task for his batteries, and they executed it brilliantly. When the first boats with infantrymen pushed off from the eastern bank, hundreds of guns concentrated their fire on the coastal strip, literally plowing it with shells. But the most difficult test was supporting the groups that had already landed. Arushanyan developed a unique fire adjustment system. Artillery observers with radios crossed to the western bank with the first landings. These soldiers, risking their lives, transmitted precise target coordinates to the eastern bank, where the main batteries were located. Shells must fly 15 meters from our positions, but not a centimeter closer. Arushanyan demanded of his artillerymen, and they achieved incredible accuracy despite the extremely difficult conditions of firing across a water barrier. In parallel with supporting the infantry, an equally important task was being solved: the crossing of the guns themselves. Arushanyan personally supervised the creation of improvised rafts and ferries. Light anti-tank guns were transported first, often on the same boats as the infantry. Special pontoons were built for heavy guns. By the end of the third day of the operation, several dozen Soviet guns were already operating on the western bank of the Dnieper. They formed a fire shield around the captured bridgeheads, repelling counterattacks by German infantry and tanks. Arushanyan developed a circular defense scheme in which each gun had pre-prepared positions for firing in all directions. The summer of '44 was marked by one of the most grandiose operations of the Great Patriotic War, Operation Bagration. For Bagrat Arushanyan, it was not just another military task. The very name of the operation, consonant with his surname, seemed to emphasize the special role of the Armenian artillerymen in this historical battle. Now a lieutenant general of artillery, Arushanyan was called upon to organize an unprecedented scale of fire support for the advancing Soviet troops on Belarusian soil. Preparation began a month before the start of the operation. Bagrat Isakovich developed a new system of artillery reconnaissance, which allowed for maximum accuracy in determining the coordinates of enemy fortifications. "We cannot afford to blindly strike at Belarusian villages and cities," he said at a meeting of artillery unit commanders. This phrase defined the entire nature of the preparation. Accuracy became the main requirement. Arushanyan created special groups of artillery scouts who, using the latest sound ranging and optical devices, drew up detailed maps of the German defenses. Every enemy battery, every pillbox and dugout was mapped with an accuracy of several meters. For the first time on such a scale, aerial photography was used. Reconnaissance aircraft daily delivered new data on enemy movements. Arushanyan's innovation was the method of, quote, "Instead of the traditional distribution of targets among individual batteries, he created a system where several artillery divisions could simultaneously concentrate fire on one particularly important target and then instantly shift it to another. This required perfect coordination and communication, and Bagrat Isakovich personally supervised the creation of a reliable communication system. Special attention was paid to minimizing civilian casualties. Arushanyan introduced the practice of, quote, "areas where residential buildings and civilian objects were located. In these zones, fire was permitted only by direct aiming and only at precisely identified targets. Quote, "These words of the general became a guide to action for all artillery commanders." On June 23, 44, at 5 in the morning, thousands of Soviet guns opened fire on German positions. The artillery preparation for Operation Bagration had begun. Arushanyan was at the command post, coordinating the actions of dozens of artillery units. His plan envisaged not just a massive bombardment, but a complex symphony of fire, where each battery had its own part. A novelty was the quote, "4" method, when, after the main artillery preparation and the start of infantry movement, the artillery suddenly resumed fire on the second echelons of the German defense, preventing the enemy from transferring reserves to threatened areas. This disoriented the German command, creating the impression that the attack was taking place simultaneously along the entire front. The accuracy of the fire, achieved through careful reconnaissance, amazed even seasoned frontline soldiers. German pillboxes and artillery positions were destroyed with the very first salvos. Captured Germans later recounted that, quote, "This was the result of the painstaking work of Arushanyan's artillerymen in zeroing in and preparing firing data." Bagrat Arushanyan's command style possessed a distinctive signature, which frontline soldiers unfailingly recognized by the results of battle. Quote, "Infantrymen would say when they saw precisely suppressed enemy firing positions and a methodically cleared corridor for an advance." His managerial talent manifested not only in planning operations, but also in his ability to work with people, from generals to ordinary gunners. Unlike many commanders of that era, Bagrat Arushanyan was not a proponent of strict discipline for discipline's sake. "An artilleryman must think, not just follow orders," he often repeated. Arushanyan fostered a special atmosphere in his headquarters where initiative and unconventional thinking were valued. Every officer could propose their idea, provided it was supported by calculations and logic. One of the distinguishing features of Arushanyan's command style was his ability to explain complex tactical tasks in simple and understandable language. He told young officers, "This ability made him not just a commander, but also a teacher for hundreds of artillerymen." In critical situations, another facet of his talent emerged: lightning-fast reactions and the ability to make decisions under uncertainty. During the battles for Kyiv in November of 43, the Germans suddenly counterattacked with tanks from an unexpected direction. Upon receiving the report, Arushanyan, in a matter of minutes, reconfigured the entire firing scheme, turning several divisions 90 degrees. This maneuver allowed them to halt the German breakthrough at the cost of minimal losses. This phrase of Arushanyan's reflected his own approach to command. He never fixated on the initial plan if the situation demanded changes. His adaptability became legendary among his subordinates. Bagrat Arushanyan was a master of resource conservation. In conditions of constant shell shortages, he developed a method of selective fire, where strikes were delivered only against the most important targets. "Every shell must pay for itself 100-fold, he demanded from his battery commanders. This rationality allowed for maximum results with minimal means. Arushanyan paid special attention to interaction with other branches of service. He regularly conducted joint exercises for artillerymen with infantry and tank crews, achieving complete mutual understanding. An artilleryman must think like an infantryman to help him effectively. Bagrat Arushanyan explained his philosophy. January 1945. Soviet troops stood on the threshold of a decisive thrust into the heart of Nazi Germany. The Vistula-Oder offensive was to be one of the last major battles on the way to Berlin. For Lieutenant General of Artillery Bagrat Arushanyan, this was an opportunity to apply all the experience accumulated over the years of war in conditions where the enemy desperately resisted, on the last lines of defense of his homeland. The Germans had created a powerful system of fortifications on Polish soil, overcoming which required unconventional solutions and impeccable coordination of all branches of arms. It was here that Arushanyan's artillery mastery reached its peak. Preparations for the operation began in December 1944. Bagrat Isakovich personally supervised the reconnaissance of the area and the planning of fire destruction. He developed the concept of an, quote, the maximum concentration of firepower in narrow breakthrough sectors. He told his officers, a feature of the planning was the unprecedented density of artillery, up to 300 barrels per kilometer of the breakthrough front. Arushanyan introduced a new method of artillery preparation, a 2-hour fire treatment of the front line, followed by fire raids on targets identified during the offensive. This made it possible to maintain the suppression effect throughout the entire day of the battle. On January 12, 1945, at 8:30 in the morning, thousands of Soviet guns opened fire on German positions. One of the most powerful artillery preparations of the entire war began. The earth trembled from the explosions of shells. Visibility on the front line was almost zero due to the dust and smoke raised into the air. Arushanyan was at the forward observation post, adjusting fire on key targets. He transmitted by radio to the division commanders. An innovative element of artillery preparation was the method of, when fire was transferred into the depth of the defense not uniformly, but in waves, creating in the enemy the illusion of the end of the shelling, and then suddenly returning to the front line. This demoralized German soldiers, preventing them from leaving cover. When the infantry and tanks moved to the attack, Arushanyan's artillery moved to the next phase, direct support for the advancing troops. Here, another innovation manifested itself, a system of mobile artillery observers who moved in the combat formations of the infantry and adjusted fire via radio communication. This ensured unprecedented accuracy and efficiency in hitting identified targets. The breakthrough of the German defenses was carried out in the shortest possible time. By the end of the first day of the offensive, Soviet troops had advanced to a depth of up to 20 kilometers. Now Arushanyan's artillerymen faced a new task, ensuring the rapid pursuit of the retreating enemy. Bagrat Isakovich developed a system of artillery advanced detachments, mobile groups consisting of light guns and self-propelled units which moved in the vanguard of the advancing troops. These detachments could independently suppress pockets of enemy resistance without waiting for the approach of the main forces. April 1945, Berlin, the last citadel of the Third Reich, was in the sights of Soviet troops. For Lieutenant General Bagrat Arushanyan, the Berlin operation became the culmination of his military career, the zenith of artillery mastery honed over 4 long years of war. The task was unprecedented in its complexity. To organize suppressive fire in densely built-up urban areas, minimizing damage to historical buildings and casualties among the civilian population. Already in March, Arushanyan began preparations for the decisive assault. He created a special map of Berlin, dividing the city into sectors and squares with assigned code designations. This allowed artillerymen to instantly redirect fire to any target without lengthy coordinate calculations. A city is not a battlefield. Here, every building can become a fortress, he explained to his officers, demanding maximum precision and selective fire. A key feature of Arushanyan's tactics in the Berlin operation was the method of, quote, instead of traditional blanket shelling of blocks, he identified key targets, command posts, communication hubs, enemy artillery positions, which were to be destroyed first. For this, special direct-fire artillery groups equipped with powerful guns were formed. On April 16th, at 5 in the morning, the artillery preparation began. Thousands of guns unleashed a barrage of fire on German positions. Arushanyan was at the observation post, personally adjusting fire on particularly important targets. A unique feature of this artillery preparation was its multi-layered nature. Targets on the front line, in the tactical and operational depth of the enemy's defense, were suppressed simultaneously. When Soviet troops entered the suburbs of Berlin, the most complex phase of the operation began: street fighting. Here, Arushanyan applied the innovative tactic of artillery escort. 1 or 2 guns were attached to each infantry assault detachment, moving directly within the combat formations, destroying enemy strongpoints in buildings. To coordinate their actions, Bagrat Isakovich developed a system of conditional signals and target designations, understandable even in conditions of radio communication loss. Concrete bunkers and fortifications, with which the city was saturated, presented a particular challenge. To destroy them, Arushanyan created special groups of large-caliber guns, operating on the principle of one bunker, one group. These groups methodically, one after another, suppressed the strongest nodes of German resistance. In the last days of April, when fighting was already taking place in the central districts of Berlin, Arushanyan faced a new problem. The enemy was using historical buildings and cultural sites as strongpoints. Here, not only military wisdom but also Bagrat Isakovich's cultural sensitivity was evident. He gave the order. This demanded exceptional skill from the artillerymen, but allowed many architectural monuments to be saved. On April 30th, when Soviet troops were fighting in the immediate vicinity of the Reichstag, Arushanyan organized the blocking of the government building area with heavy artillery fire. High-power howitzers proved particularly effective, literally breaking through the concrete walls of bunkers. At the same time, fire was conducted with jeweler's precision to exclude hitting their own advancing units. On May 2, 1945, the Berlin garrison capitulated. Bagrat Arushanyan's artillery made a decisive contribution to this victory. His methods of conducting fire in urban areas became a classic of military art, studied in academies around the world. Over the years of the war, Bagrat Isakovich Arushanyan was awarded numerous decorations, each of which reflected a certain stage of his combat path and recognition of his merits at the highest level. The award certificate is not just a document, but a kind of biography of an officer, written in the language of feats and achievements. Arushanyan's first significant award was the Order of the Red Banner, which he received in '42 for organizing artillery defense near Stalingrad. The award certificate specifically noted, "The Order of Suvorov Second Class was awarded to Bagrat Isakovich after the Battle of Kursk." This order, named after the great Russian general, was awarded for outstanding success in planning and conducting operations. The award recommendation stated, "Of particular value to Bagrat Isakovich was the Order of Kutuzov First Class, received for the operation to force the Dnieper." Mikhail Kutuzov was known for his strategic genius, and the order bearing his name was awarded for skillful organization of defense and counteroffensive. The award certificate noted, "For the liberation of Belarus during Operation Bagration, Bagrat Isakovich was awarded the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky First Class. This order was awarded for special merits in liberating Soviet land from invaders." The award recommendation stated, "The highest assessment of Arushanyan's merits was the Order of Lenin, awarded to him for the Berlin operation." The award certificate stated, "Comrade Arushanyan proved himself to be an outstanding organizer of the artillery offensive in difficult urban conditions." The firing methods he developed allowed for effective suppression of enemy resistance nodes with minimal destruction of civilian objects. In addition to orders, Bagrat Isakovich was awarded numerous medals, including for the defense of Stalingrad, for the capture of Berlin, for the victory over Germany. Each of these awards had special significance for him, marking important milestones in his combat path. It is interesting that the phrase "showed a creative approach to solving combat tasks" is often found in Arushanyan's award certificates, an unusual wording for military documents of that time. This testifies to the recognition of his unconventional thinking and innovative methods of artillery fire. With the end of the war, a new chapter of life began for Bagrat Arushanyan. The artillery genius, whose methods brought victory in dozens of battles, now had to transform his combat experience into a theoretical legacy for future generations of defenders of the motherland. In the summer of 1945, Lieutenant General Arushanyan received an appointment to the Dzerzhinsky Artillery Academy, where he was to head the Department of Artillery Tactics. The first months of work at the academy were devoted to the painstaking collection and systematization of combat experience. We must preserve every lesson of this war, paid for with the blood of our comrades, Bagrat Isakovich told his colleagues. He gathered a group of frontline artillery officers and organized extensive work on studying archival documents, combat reports, maps, and diagrams of operations conducted. Arushanyan paid special attention to the analysis of the most complex and non-standard combat situations. He understood that it was in critical moments that innovative solutions were born, which now had to be transformed into theoretical provisions. Under his leadership, methods for artillery support for forcing large water obstacles, breaking through fortified areas, and conducting fire in urban environments were developed. In 1947, Arushanyan's fundamental work, Artillery in Modern Combat, was published, becoming a desktop book for several generations of officers. In this work, Bagrat Isakovich summarized his combat experience and formulated the key principles of using artillery in various types of combat operations. Of particular value were the sections devoted to the interaction of artillery with other branches of troops, a problem that Arushanyan considered critically important. Artillery is not an independent force, but a powerful instrument in the orchestra of battle, where each instrument must sound in harmony with others. This metaphor of Arushanyan reflected his deep understanding of the essence of modern combat as a complex system of interactions. Not limited to theoretical work, Bagrat Isakovich actively participated in field exercises where new methods of artillery application were tested and improved. He personally supervised experimental firing, introducing innovative methods of fire adjustment and target designation. Special attention was paid to adapting artillery tactics to the conditions of possible use of nuclear weapons, a new reality of the post-war world. In the 50s, Arushanyan led a research group to study the capabilities of artillery in confronting the tank formations of a potential enemy. The results of these studies formed the basis of the new anti-tank doctrine of the Soviet Army, taking into account the emergence of more powerful armored vehicles and new means of protection. The intellectual legacy of Bagrat Arushanyan was not limited to his military achievements. After the war, the Lieutenant General dedicated himself to creating a fundamental scientific basis for modern artillery art. His scientific works, written based on extensive combat experience, became a true encyclopedia for several generations of officers. In 1950, his monograph, Organization of Artillery Support in an Offensive Battle, was published, where Arushanyan meticulously analyzed the evolution of artillery application methods from the beginning of the war to the storming of Berlin. Of particular value were the chapters dedicated to interaction with aviation and tank formations, a topic that had received insufficient attention before him. Bagrat Arushanyan established an entire school of artillery thought. Under his guidance, dozens of officers defended their candidate and doctoral dissertations, developing individual aspects of his concepts. He encouraged a creative approach and unconventional thinking, often telling his students, "War never repeats itself exactly, so ready-made recipes for victory quickly become obsolete." One of the most important directions of Arushanyan's scientific work was the development of textbooks for military schools and academies. His, published in 1953, was distinguished not only by the depth of its theoretical material, but also by its practical orientation. Each provision was illustrated with examples from real combat operations, which made learning maximally effective. Technical developments also occupied a significant place in Arushanyan's activities. He led a group of specialists who created a new system of artillery instrumental reconnaissance, allowing for high-precision determination of target coordinates in all weather conditions. This complex code named Zenith was adopted into service in 1956 and remained one of the best in the world for a long time. Of particular relevance in the post-war period were Arushanyan's studies in the field of anti-nuclear protection for artillery units. He developed a concept of dispersed basing, with the possibility of rapid concentration of firepower in the main direction. This methodology allowed for minimizing losses from potential nuclear strikes while maintaining the combat effectiveness of artillery groups. Many of Bagrat Arushanyan's ideas were ahead of their time. His concept of network-centric fire control, which involved creating a unified information system for all fire assets on the battlefield, was fully implemented only at the beginning of the 21st century with the development of digital technologies. At the same time, the basic principles formulated by Arushanyan retained their relevance. The general also made a significant contribution to the development of high-precision weapons theory. In his later works, he predicted the emergence of guided artillery shells and developed tactical methods for their application. The future of artillery is not in increasing calibers, but in improving accuracy. This idea of Arushanyan's became prophetic for the development of artillery systems in the second half of the 20th century. Bagrat Arushanyan's scientific legacy continues to live on in modern military science. His works have been translated into many languages and are studied in military academies of various countries. The methods developed by the Armenian artillerymen have found application in local conflicts of the late 20th, early 21st century, confirming their effectiveness in modern conditions. Surprisingly, many of Arushanyan's concepts proved applicable not only in military affairs, but also in the civilian sphere. His methods for managing complex systems and principles for optimizing resources were reflected in management theory and logistics. This once again proves the universality and depth of thought of the outstanding artilleryman. Time relentlessly counts the years, but the memory of outstanding individuals remains in history forever. Bagrat Arushanyan, a man whose name is inscribed in golden letters in the annals of Soviet military art, passed away in 1971, leaving behind a rich legacy of military thought and practical achievements. In Russia and Armenia, Arushanyan's memory is preserved not only in official museums and textbooks. Streets in Yerevan and several Russian cities bear his name. A bust of the general is installed at the Military Academy of Missile Forces and Artillery, and diagrams of the artillery operations he developed hang in lecture halls. The memory of the outstanding compatriot is especially cherished in Armenia. In his native village of Lori, A small but very heartfelt museum has been created, where personal belongings, photographs, documents, and awards of Bagrat Isakovich are collected. Annually, conferences and veteran meetings are held here, discussing Arushanyan's contribution to victory and the development of military art. Modern military specialists continue to study the legacy of the artillery genius. Surprisingly, many tactical techniques he developed in the middle of the last century remain relevant even in the era of high-precision weapons and digital technologies. His concept of selective fire formed the basis of the modern theory of using expensive, high-precision ammunition. The principles of maneuvering fire without moving the guns themselves have become fundamental for new-generation multiple-launch rocket systems. Of particular value is Arushanyan's method for minimizing collateral damage during combat operations in urban environments. In local conflicts of recent decades, this problem has become central, and the approaches proposed by the Armenian artilleryman during the assault on Berlin proved surprisingly effective. Military historians note Arushanyan's unique ability to foresee the development of military art. In his later works, he wrote about the prospects of artillery robotization, the creation of self-guided shells, and automatic targeting systems, all of which became a reality only in the 21st century. The main lesson that Bagrat Arushanyan left us is the understanding that even in the most technologically advanced war, human intellect remains the decisive factor. No computers or automatic systems can replace a commander's ability to think creatively, find unconventional solutions, and anticipate the development of a situation. Arushanyan's legacy is not only military theory, but also an example of service to the motherland, loyalty to duty, and continuous self-improvement. From a young lieutenant to a lieutenant general, from the first tragic days of the war to the triumphant assault on Berlin, from practice to theory, his entire path was a continuous movement forward to new heights of mastery.